The invasion begins. The command center beneath Geneva hummed with tension as Admiral Eliza Chen reviewed the holographic display one final time. The massive alien fleet had crossed Neptune's orbit just hours ago, and Earth's conventional defenses would be worthless against their technology. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she turned to face the gathered military and scientific leaders. "Project Cronus is our only option now," she declared, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Dr. Nakamura, is the system operational?" The chief physicist nodded grimly. His eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights spent perfecting the experimental weapon. "The temporal displacement field is ready, Admiral. But I must emphasize again, we don't fully understand the consequences of manipulating time itself. And I don't fully understand the consequences of extinction," Chen replied. "How much time do we have?" The tactical officer's voice was tight. "The Myriad fleet will reach lunar orbit in 47 minutes. Their deceleration suggests they're preparing for a strategic deployment." On the main screen, the alien armada appeared as a sea of crystalline structures, each vessel shaped like a massive geometric shard. The fleet moved with perfect coordination, their engines leaving trails of blue-green energy as they approached Earth's moon. Commander Salim Raza stood at attention beside the Admiral. "Our conventional weapons can't touch their shields. Every simulation ends the same way, total defeat within hours. Then we change the rules of engagement." Admiral Chen's gaze swept across the room. "Activate Project Cronus. Let's show these visitors that humanity isn't as defenseless as they believe." Aboard the flagship of the Myriad Collective, High Commander Xerix observed the blue planet with detached curiosity. His elongated fingers traced patterns on the control interface as he considered the primitive world before him. The Myriad had conquered 17 star systems in their expansion, and none had offered meaningful resistance. "Tactical assessment?" he asked, his voice a melodic series of clicks and whistles translated by the ship's computer. Strategic Officer Nyleth bowed slightly. "The humans possess rudimentary spacecraft and basic orbital defenses. They've detected our approach but have not deployed their primitive fleet. Perhaps they recognize the futility of resistance." "Perhaps," Xerix mused. "Or perhaps they're planning something unexpected. These Earth species are known for their creativity when threatened." Nyleth's compound eyes flashed with amusement. "What can they possibly do against our technology? We've studied their capabilities extensively. Their most advanced weapons are like children's toys compared to our quantum arsenals." Xerix moved to the observation dome, watching as Earth grew larger in their view. "Arrogance has been the downfall of many invaders throughout galactic history. The humans may be technologically inferior, but they've survived countless natural disasters and their own self-destructive tendencies. That suggests a certain resilience. Would you prefer we open communications before the subjugation begins?" Nyleth asked. "Yes. Send the standard terms of surrender. Give them the opportunity to accept their place in the collective without unnecessary bloodshed." The communications officer quickly configured the universal translator. "Message prepared, Commander." "Transmit," Xerix ordered, settling into his command chair. "And prepare the first wave of occupation vessels. I suspect this will be quick, but I want to be ready for any surprises." In the Cronus facility 50 meters beneath Geneva's surface, Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura monitored the temporal displacement generators as they powered up. The massive rings surrounding the compound hummed with energy, creating a low vibration that rattled coffee cups and set teeth on edge. "Quantum synchronization at 70%, reported his assistant, Dr. Maya Santos. "Paradox limiters are stable." Nakamura nodded, but couldn't shake the unease in his stomach. The technology they were about to deploy had only been tested on microscopic scales. Using it to trap an entire fleet in a temporal loop was like jumping from a paper airplane to a supersonic jet without any intermediate steps. "Admiral," he said into his comm, "once activated, we can't predict all the side effects. The mathematics suggests possible fractures in local spacetime. Admiral Chen's voice came back immediately. "Understood, Doctor. But we're out of options. The aliens have just transmitted their demands: unconditional surrender or total extermination. Conventional military response is projected to fail within hours." Nakamura closed his eyes briefly. "Then may whatever gods exist forgive us for what we're about to do to the fabric of reality." He entered the final authorization code, and the Cronus system roared to life. The temporal displacement field expanded outward from Earth, invisible to conventional sensors, but fundamentally altering the flow of time in an expanding sphere. Commander Xerix was reviewing the deployment plans when he first noticed something strange. The tactical display seemed to flicker, the data streams momentarily freezing before continuing. He blinked his nictitating membranes, wondering if he had imagined it. "Navigation. Report status," he ordered. The navigation officer frowned at her console. "Commander, I'm detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations. Our descent trajectory is shifting." "Shifting? Explain." "I can't, sir. It's as if." The officer stopped mid-sentence, her expression frozen in confusion. Xerix rose from his command chair, suddenly alert. "Officer Merrick, report." But Merrick remained motionless, as did every other crew member on the bridge. Xerix moved toward the tactical station, noticing with growing alarm that the display indicators had stopped changing. Even the stars outside the viewport seemed unnaturally still. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything resumed. Officer Merrick continued her sentence as if there had been no interruption. "As if the space-time around us is fluctuating. I've never seen readings like these." "Commander," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving unusual energy signatures from Earth. They appear to be." He froze again, mid-gesture. This time, Xerix was prepared. He checked the chronometer and watched in disbelief as it cycled back 20 seconds, then resumed its count. The bridge crew continued their reports, unaware that they had just repeated the exact same movements and words. A cold realization washed over him. The humans weren't surrendering. They were fighting back with a weapon the Myriad had never encountered. "Full stop," he ordered. "Cease all approach operations immediately." But it was too late. The temporal displacement field had already enveloped the entire fleet, creating a bubble where time no longer flowed linearly, but cycled in short loops. Each ship was caught in its own temporal prison, experiencing the same moments over and over while the rest of the universe continued forward. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the holographic display as the alien fleet suddenly halted its advance. The massive vessels now hung in space, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. "It's working," breathed Commander Raza. "They're caught in the temporal field." Dr. Nakamura studied the readings with intense concentration. The aliens are experiencing time differently than we are. From their perspective, they're trapped in loops of varying duration, from seconds to minutes. They can't coordinate, can't advance their attack plans. "Then we've won?" asked one of the younger officers. Admiral Chen's expression remained grave. "No, we've bought time, nothing more." "Dr. Nakamura, how long can we maintain the field?" The physicist shook his head. "The power requirements are enormous. We can keep it stable for perhaps 72 hours before we risk catastrophic failure. And there's another problem, which is, the temporal field is creating ripples in space-time. If we maintain it too long, those ripples could become tears, affecting not just the alien fleet, but our entire solar system." Chen turned to her tactical officer. "Then we have 72 hours to find a more permanent solution. Prepare our orbital defenses and ready the kinetic strike platforms. If we can't keep them trapped forever, we'll need to be ready when they break free." As Earth's military forces mobilized, the Myriad fleet remained suspended in their temporal prison, experiencing the same moments repeatedly, while being unable to advance their invasion. High Commander Xerix, trapped in his own loop, was gradually becoming aware of their situation and desperately searching for a way to break free. The invasion had been halted, but the true battle was just beginning. As Earth prepared its counterstrike, the fundamental laws of physics trembled under the strain of humanity's desperate gambit. Time itself had become a weapon, and no one could predict the consequences of tampering with such a fundamental force. Time's unberechenbare prison. High Commander Xerix experienced the same 17 seconds for what felt like the 1,000th time. His tactical officer began her report about gravitational anomalies, froze mid-sentence, and then started again from the beginning. The stars outside the viewport jumped slightly with each reset, creating a subtle strobing effect that was beginning to drive him mad. Unlike his crew, Xerix had somehow maintained awareness through each loop. Perhaps it was his species' unique neural structure, or maybe just random chance, but the result was the same. He was conscious while trapped in an endlessly repeating moment. During one cycle, he managed to access the ship's temporal sensors. The readings confirmed his worst fears. The humans had deployed some kind of time distortion weapon, creating localized loops throughout the fleet. Each ship was experiencing its own temporal prison, making coordination impossible. Clever primitives, he muttered during his brief window of action before the loop reset again. In 17 seconds, he couldn't accomplish much, but over countless repetitions, he was gradually piecing together a potential countermeasure. If he could synchronize the ship's quantum field generators to vibrate at the exact frequency of the temporal loop, perhaps he could break free, at least long enough to communicate with the rest of the fleet. As the loop reset once more, Xerix moved with practiced precision, his fingers dancing across the control interface. Just before the 17 seconds elapsed, he activated the quantum field. The bridge shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed as reality itself seemed to warp around them. For a brief, terrifying moment, Xerix saw multiple versions of his crew overlapping, echoes from different iterations of the loop bleeding together. Then the viewscreen cleared, and time resumed its normal flow. "Report," he commanded, hoping this wasn't just another variation of the loop. His tactical officer looked disoriented. "Commander, something has happened. Ship chronometers indicate we've lost approximately 47 hours." Xerix felt a surge of triumph. They'd broken free. Partially, at least. Ship status: operational, but multiple systems report straying from temporal stress. The fleet. She paused, checking her readings. "Most of our vessels remain trapped in the temporal anomaly. We appear to be the only ship that has partially escaped. The humans have deployed a weapon beyond their technological level," Xerix said grimly. "They've trapped us in a temporal prison. Begin analyzing the frequency of the time distortion field. We need to free the rest of the fleet." On Earth, alarms blared throughout the Cronus facility. Dr. Nakamura stared at the readings in disbelief. "One of the alien ships is breaking free from the temporal field," he reported to Admiral Chen. "They're adapting faster than we anticipated." Chen's face hardened. "How is that possible? You said they'd be trapped for 72 hours. Their technology is more advanced than we realized. They're using some kind of quantum harmonics to counteract the temporal loops." Nakamura's fingers flew across his console. "I'm adjusting the field parameters, but this is unknown territory. If we push too hard, we risk collapsing the entire system. And if we don't push hard enough, we face an alien invasion," Chen countered. "Do whatever it takes, Doctor. Earth's survival depends on it." As Nakamura worked to reinforce the temporal field, disturbing readings began appearing on his monitors. The space-time fabric around the solar system was showing signs of stress, microscopic tears forming at the boundaries of the temporal loops. "Admiral," he said quietly, "we have another problem. The field is destabilizing local space-time. If these tears expand, what happens?" Nakamura's voice was grim. "Best case, localized time distortions, areas where time flows differently than the surrounding space. Worst case, temporal fractures that could spread throughout the solar system. We'd be looking at unpredictable consequences, causality violations, paradox cascades." English, Doctor. Reality itself could unravel around us. We might have stopped the invasion only to destroy ourselves. Zarek studied the data his science team had compiled. The human weapon was ingenious, crude by myriad standards, but implemented with surprising effectiveness. By creating overlapping fields of distorted time, they had essentially removed the fleet from normal spacetime without destroying a single ship. Can we counter it? He asked his chief scientist. Not completely, not yet, she replied. But we've managed to create a pocket of stable time around our ship. We can extend it gradually, perhaps free nearby vessels. Do it, and prepare a message probe, one that can penetrate the temporal barrier. The collective must be warned about this weapon. As his crew worked to expand their bubble of normal time, Zarek contemplated the humans with newfound respect. They had not only anticipated the invasion, but had developed a defense that targeted the one thing all species relied upon: the constant flow of time. The tactical display showed Earth's military mobilizing. Orbital defense platforms were powering up, and small squadrons of fighters were taking position. They were preparing for the moment when the temporal trap would fail. They know this isn't permanent, Zarek mused. They're buying time to strengthen their conventional defenses. His communications officer approached cautiously. Commander, I've been analyzing their broadcasts. There's something unusual happening on Earth. Their scientists are reporting temporal anomalies spreading beyond our fleet. Explain. It appears their weapon is having unintended consequences. Localized time distortions are appearing throughout their solar system. Some regions are experiencing accelerated time, others slowed or even reversed. Zarek considered this information thoughtfully. They've deployed a weapon they can't fully control. Interesting. On the outskirts of Chicago, Dr. Maya Santos watched in horror as the park before her shifted through seasons and minutes. Trees budded, bloomed, shed their leaves, and were covered with snow in rapid succession. Birds appeared and disappeared mid-flight. The effect stopped abruptly at the park's boundaries, creating a surreal window into temporal chaos. Similar reports were coming in from around the globe. A village in Peru was stuck repeating the same hour. In Tokyo, a city block was aging at 20 times the normal rate, buildings crumbling before horrified onlookers. Off the coast of Australia, sailors reported waters where time flowed backward, waves retreating from shores and clouds forming from mist rising from the sea. The temporal fractures are spreading, Dr. Nakamura reported to the Emergency Council. Each time we adjust the field to keep the aliens contained, we create new stress points in space-time. Admiral Chen looked grim. How long before these anomalies become global? Days, perhaps hours. The mathematics becomes increasingly unpredictable as the fractures multiply. The Defense Secretary leaned forward. Can we shut down the temporal field? Return to conventional defenses? Nakamura shook his head. The process has become self-sustaining. Even if we deactivate Project Cronus, the tears in space-time will continue to spread. We've started something we can't stop. Then what options do we have? Demanded the president. Nakamura hesitated. There may be one possibility. The alien technology, specifically their quantum field generators, might be capable of stabilizing the temporal fractures. If we could collaborate with them. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. You're suggesting we ask the invaders for help? The president's voice was incredulous. I'm suggesting that either we work together, or we both face extinction. The laws of physics don't care about our conflict, and right now, those laws are breaking down around us. Zarek was reviewing the latest temporal scans when the message came through. A simple communication request from Earth's leadership. Put it through, he ordered, curious despite his caution. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the view screen. Her expression was stern but controlled. Commander Zarek, I am Admiral Eliza Chen of Earth's United Defense Force. We find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. Indeed, Admiral, your temporal weapon was unexpected, impressive, but flawed. Chen's expression didn't change. We're aware of the flaws. The temporal fractures are spreading throughout our solar system. According to our scientists, they will eventually destabilize all local spacitime, affecting both our worlds. And you're contacting me because mutual destruction serves neither of us. Our scientists believe your quantum field technology might help stabilize the fractures if implemented on a large scale. Xerix leaned back, considering. You trap my fleet in time, then ask for our assistance. Humans truly are audacious. We're practical, Chen countered. We deploy the only defense available to us against an overwhelming invasion force. Now we face a common threat. And what do you propose? A temporary alliance. Your ships have the technology to repair the temporal damage, while we have the necessary understanding of the fracture patterns. Together, we might save both our peoples. Xerix studied the human admiral thoughtfully. Working with these primitives was hardly what he had expected when leading the invasion fleet, but the temporal scans confirmed her assessment. If the fractures continued to spread, eventually they would reach a critical point where normal spacetime would collapse entirely. And afterward, when the crisis is resolved, Chen's gaze was unwavering. Afterward, we negotiate. As equals. Your invasion has demonstrated that we're not as defenseless as you might have believed. Perhaps conquest isn't the only possible relationship between our civilizations. The Myriad commander considered his options. The collective had colonized many worlds, but few had offered resistance of this magnitude. These humans were resourceful, willing to risk their own existence in defense of their world. There was something admirable in that. Very well, Admiral. We will coordinate our efforts to repair the temporal damage. But know this, the Myriad Collective does not forget or forgive easily. This alliance is born of necessity, nothing more. Understood, Commander. I'll have our technical teams contact your scientists immediately. Time is not on our side. Ironically enough. As the communication ended, Xerix turned to his chief scientist. Prepare our quantum field generators for large-scale deployment, and analyze everything about their temporal technology. When this crisis ends, such knowledge may prove valuable. Over the following days, an uneasy collaboration formed between the former enemies. Myriad scientists, freed from their temporal prisons by carefully calibrated quantum fields, worked alongside Earth's physicists to map and stabilize the spreading fractures. The process was painstaking and dangerous. Each temporal tear required precise calibration, and several ships were lost when fractures unexpectedly expanded. But gradually, the combined technologies began to take effect. The anomalies slowed their spread, then stabilized, and finally began to recede. In Geneva, Admiral Chen and Commander Xerix stood before a holographic display showing the solar system. The red indicators marking temporal fractures were steadily turning green as they were neutralized. It appears to be working, Chen observed. The latest projections show complete stabilization within 48 hours. Xerix nodded. My scientists report the same. Your temporal weapon was reckless, but your understanding of its effects has proven valuable. And what happens when the crisis is fully resolved, Commander? Does your fleet resume its invasion? The alien commander was silent for a long moment. The collective sent us to conquer a primitive world of minimal resistance. That is clearly not what we found here. No, it isn't. Your species deployed a weapon that manipulated fundamental forces of the universe, willing to risk your own existence rather than submit. The collective will need to reassess its approach to Earth. Are you suggesting peace? I'm suggesting caution on both sides. You've demonstrated that humanity is capable of both great ingenuity and great recklessness. The Myriad respects the former, but cannot ignore the latter. Chen smiled faintly. Then perhaps we start with a treaty. A recognition of boundaries and an agreement for cautious cultural exchange. We have much to learn from each other, ideally without the threat of extinction hanging over us. Xerix regarded the human admiral with his multifaceted eyes. A sensible proposal. I will convey it to the collective. Though I suspect our future interactions will never be simple. The most valuable relationships rarely are, Commander. As the last of the temporal fractures were sealed, Earth and the Myriad began the complex process of establishing a new relationship, not as conqueror and conquered, but as wary equals who had glimpsed each other's potential for both creation and destruction. The invasion had been halted not by conventional weapons, but by humanity's willingness to bend reality itself in its defense, a quality that earned both respect and caution from their would-be conquerors. Time, which had briefly become their battlefield, now stretched before both civilizations with new possibilities neither had anticipated when the Myriad fleet first entered Earth's solar system.